The music you're hearing is coming from this box, the SE-909. This took about 4 months of spare time to make, and it actually started with a truck. I was trying to make it beep when it goes backwards, and I was getting really frustrated at the less than optimal, let's say, selection of default sounds in the sound block. But what I also found was that by starting and stopping some of the default sounds really fast, you can get clicks for things like the clicking of the blinker lights inside the truck cabin, and also for the creaking of the suspension when the truck is heavy, which really adds to the realism and the immersion. And then I thought, well, if I can have clicks, can I have them at regular intervals? So I started doing some testing.
Fuel critical.
Then I tried to figure out if I can insert timers in such a way that I can make notes longer. Because this was running only on timers, I started thinking of it as like the space engineer's equivalent of analog as opposed to digital, which would be scripted. Now, I have used drum machines in the past, but at this point I wasn't thinking of any of that. I was just freestyling a concept to see if it would even work. I was solving a series of little challenges one at a time without looking at the big picture at all, which made it even funnier when I found this thing on YouTube, because I guess similar problems do sometimes lead to similar solutions. Anyway, once I saw that the proof of concept worked, I wanted to see how far I could take this. So I made a progressively more complicated series of drum machines. But then I ran into a wall because certain things just can't be done with actions and have to be scripted. But by now the machine was becoming too tedious to upgrade, so I just published it as it was and forgot about it. But my obsession with making the sound block my bitch was not over.
I said, bitch.
I wanted to see what else I could squeeze out of the sound block given its limitations. But that can't be done with timers. It needs more serious scripting.
But you said bitch though.
The first prototype carried over a lot of the design philosophy of the previous machine, but I found myself having to constantly rearrange buttons to update the UI, and God forbid I had to move the programmable block by accident, then all the buttons had to be reassigned. So I threw everything on a flat sheet and just worked on the functionality and let the buttons find each other in the process. This worked, and in time I found an arrangement where things that are relevant to each other are close together. By the way, I did my due diligence and tried to make a rotary knob, but very quickly it became apparent that that has no future, and I wasn't even going to try with a piston fader. One thing you may notice in the final layout is that it's more vertical than horizontal as in the first prototype and how most drum machines in real life tend to be. This is a direct result of having to use it in Space Engineers, where looking up and down is more predictable than looking left and right, so the main axis of information pretty much has to be vertical. The main UX persona that came out of this work is like Pinocchio with no arms and a severe neck injury, who can only push buttons with his nose and has to turn his whole body. It's quite an artificial set of limitations, but it was also quite fun to work around. The sound engine has a polyphony of 110 sounds, and each instrument can use many speakers at once for synthesis effects and extra loudness. The game allows, 128 sounds to be played at the same time, which means that at max saturation, the drum machine still leaves 18 sounds for the rest of the game. It turns out that panning isn't really possible. For standard pan to work where the sound is spread between the two ears, you need two sets of speakers both directly opposite each other, and you need to be perpendicular to the line between them. If you turn even a little bit, the sound moves. So no pan and all the speakers are grouped together. As this drum machine was scripted, I figured it's okay to also require a mod. Not like a serious mod. This is still a purely scripted vanilla machine, but just some oscillator sounds that I can use to synthesize a whole bunch of other more complex instruments. The sound block is extremely limited. It can play samples from the beginning, stop them, and adjust volume during playback. That's it. Pitch cannot be changed, which is why I had to externally generate a sample for each note. The oscillators are sine, triangle, sawtooth, square, looped, low, white, high filtered noises, clicks, and two sample banks that contain the sound block's regular sounds. A simple version of additive synthesis is possible by playing multiple oscillator samples at the same time, and the Space Engineer's mixer adds them together roughly the same way that I would if it were possible to script this in-game. So this is an actual for-real synth with volume envelopes and LFO and a delay effect. The timing is limited by the game's frame rate. The game runs at 60 frames a second, and the script runs once per frame. This means that beats per minute can be changed only in very large steps, especially in higher values. Shuffle is also quite coarse because, again, everything is quantized to 60 frames per second. And because there can be some irregularities in the timing, it still has a sense of being an analog machine, as things are always a little unpredictable. The mixer is also a little fake. I have no way of measuring the output sound, so the mixer shows the volume envelopes instead. It's not perfect, but it's something. At least this way you can see the overall dynamics of your sound. There are a number of unresolved issues and bugs that I am aware of, but I feel like they're only worth fixing if there's ever any real interest in this thing. In which case it's also possible to add LFO and automation for other parameters besides volume, as well as a workable limitation of side chaining and maybe some filter-like concept using the harmonic series. Anyway, that's it for this video. Thanks for watching.